Tonight, we are honored to welcome Sergeant Kevin LEACH, a retired Canadian Armed Forces member. After a decade of service in armored reconnaissance from 2008 to 2018, Kevin decided to move to KU. And some of us were impressed at Kevin's Ukrainian. It's fantastic. He worked with OSC, assisting with the conflict monitoring along the line of contact in Donbass. But following Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Kevin began delivering humanitarian aid, which eventually led him to establishing Sabre Training Advisory Group, a nonprofit organization providing NATO standard military training directly to Ukrainian forces. Kevin brings a rare blend of military expertise, on-the-ground humanitarian experience, and a deep knowledge of war in Ukraine. His leadership has helped reduce casualties and directly supports Ukraine's fight for sovereignty. After Kevin's presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and we encourage you to engage in conversation and take this rare opportunity and take advantage of his insight.
First of all, I just want to thank Nadia and Terry for helping to set all of this up. Events like this are quite far out of my bailiwick. They don't involve rifles or running around, so it's a little tough for me. But I couldn't have done it without them. I'm really thrilled to be here, and thank you all for coming as well. So I'm very happy Nadia has done my intro for me, so I can skip straight ahead to the most depressing part of the speech. But please stick with me because it does get better. So just a little bit first, before we dive into that, about Sabre. So what our organization is, it's a registered not-for-profit, both here in Canada and in Ukraine. How we operate is we bring NATO member country instructors who are retired and are now civilians. We bring them out to Ukraine, and we train Ukrainian troops. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that's the most concise version. We have very strict requirements about the people that we bring out there, and we make sure that we are listening as much as we are speaking when it comes to our Ukrainian training partners. Because I'll get into this a little bit more in detail later, but there's often quite a large mismatch between what NATO knows how to do and what this war requires of the soldiers in it. So, first of all, we're going to start by framing the problem. And as I said, this is going to be the most depressing part. On screen, you see before you the cover of a report that was given to me by my friend and the lead author, Serhiy Bakhlai. He works for the Come Back Alive Foundation. I think a lot of people here will be familiar with them. They interviewed, I think it was about 300 Ukrainian soldiers, and got their opinions on training and sort of tested their levels of motivation. And what they found in that report was, it's tough to read. For a lot of these troops, especially this is in this case the conscripted soldiers, they're starting out at a base level of motivation. Then they get conscripted. That level of motivation rises because they decide, you know what, I'm going to survive this. I'm going to apply myself, and I'm going to come back home alive. The problem is, they begin the training, and that motivation level drops down to below the baseline level. There are a lot of problems for that, highlighted on the screen there. And this is not to beat up on the Ukrainian instructors. The reality is, the most experienced soldiers who would be the best instructors are all needed in the fight. There's a serious manpower shortage, and it's one that we're always going to be at a disadvantage on. So it's something that just is a bit of an inescapable barrier. But that's where Sabre comes in. There are also a lot of what I would say is a lack of kind of coherent standards in the Ukrainian military. And again, it's not to assign blame, it's not to beat up on people. The Ukrainian military started, they didn't start at 0 in 1991, they started at -10, because they started with a Soviet military tradition. Soviet military training it's probably better just not to have it, to start with nothing, because it is not intended for modern militaries, and it is not intended for the way that we need to fight. There's also now kind of moving a little bit away from Ukraine. There is the Western NATO-provided training. And there's a lot of mismatches there. So NATO only recently got out of 20 years of counterinsurgency warfare. And it's very, very different from what we're seeing, this peer warfare between Ukraine and Russia. And unfortunately, there are a lot of what we call training scars, over-reliance on certain tactics that worked in Afghanistan, they worked in Iraq, and they are absolutely deadly. All they do is get you killed in Ukraine. A small example of that is an over-reliance on helicopter medical evacuation. In Iraq and Afghanistan, ours, meaning Western forces, had such an advantage over our enemies that when one of our troops was injured, we could smash anything that came near that point of injury, fly a helicopter in, load that wounded soldier up, and get them to a higher level medical point, usually within an hour. We talked about that as the golden hour. Well, that doesn't exist in Ukraine. And it's modifications like that that have to be made to the Western training before it's going to be fully relevant in the Ukrainian battle space. Moving even further back, there's also now, when it comes to resourcing training inside of Ukraine, there's a lot of problems. The biggest one for me is one that I contend with a lot in terms of people that I speak to in our sphere in terms of military support for Ukraine, and it's a massive, massive overemphasis on drones. There are a lot of people who believe that we can fight a war without having any infantry. They believe we can have this unmanned battlefield, and I'm here to tell you that that doesn't work. The role of the infantry, I don't know if there are any infanteers in the room, go ahead and throw your hand up if you're here, but the role of the infantry is to close with and destroy the enemy and to take and hold ground. The infantry are the army. The rest of us, like armored recce, we just exist to enable them. And that's the case with drones as well. Drones are an incredibly valuable capability, but they exist to enable the infantry. And currently in Ukraine, we have a terrible, terrible deficit of infantry. A friend of mine and a former instructor with Sabre, recently she mentioned in our kind of alumni group chat that she lost a very close friend of hers who is also a drone operator. I should mention she's a drone operator. He died in a firefight with Russian forces in Pokrovsk, and they were able to advance on his position because there is a lack of infantry. And that's just one of those mismatches where a lot of people don't realize the situation on the ground. And that's one of the reasons that Sabre concentrates on training infantry so that we can help address that mismatch. And I'm hoping to start working on a higher scale for that. So that's the depressing part over. Is everyone sufficiently sad? Okay, so Sabre at a glance. We started in November of 2022, where, as I said, we're composed of former NATO personnel. You can see on the right a few of the units that we have worked with. I'm going to tell you guys a story. That's one I want to spend most of my time on, and it's about a soldier from the 22nd Brigade. You can see their badge in the middle of that little display. Anyhow, our mission, okay, to strengthen Ukraine's immediate and long-term defensive capabilities. We're going to do that by building out their military, helping them develop their instructor corps. And in terms of what we're looking for, believe me, I'll get to that as well. We have quite a list of needs. So, first, the part that I really want to get to. So, since 2022, Sabre has trained 4,200 Ukrainian soldiers, actually a little over now. That's been the result of over 40,000 man-hours of training. We have also delivered more than $200,000 US of donated medical supplies. And the last part there is the one that I'm most proud of, and I'll get into that in my main story here. Our training has shown that we can achieve a 60% reduction in casualties. And that's overall casualties. We can also reduce the ratio of soldiers killed to wounded. And it's not by doing anything magical, it's just because we follow the very well-refined NATO systematic methodology of training. On the screen there, I have his permission to use his photo. It's a soldier named Pasha. He was one of the platoon commanders in a company of soldiers, so that's about 100 soldiers. He was in charge of 30 of them. He was one of the platoon commanders that we trained in the summer of 2023. We had a full 2 months to train that company. And Pasha was probably, I think it's fair to say, our best student. He was very, very dedicated. He always paid attention. Let me skip ahead. He's still alive. Okay, so I just mean at that time, as a student, he was incredibly attentive. He was incredibly motivated, and he took to what we had to teach him. I had a few officers, former U.S. Marine Corps officers, former Canadian Army officers, and they were teaching the officers of that company things like mission planning, how to not just, it's not Tilki вперед. It's, we actually have to go forward with a plan in mind. How are we going to address things? What's the goal that we have for the mission that we're launching? Pasha is the guy that we stayed in contact with the most. He and I, that last photo is him in the winter of 2023. That's him in the summer of 2024. You can see, frankly, you can see the change in him. He was my kind of like #1 conduit into knowing how the troops were doing. That first photo on the top left there, that's a crater that was left over by a cab glide bomb. One of the things that we worked on with the troops is we always hit. Do not stick in a big group for long. Have whatever conversation you need to have in your big group and then disperse immediately. He sent me that photo the day after that bomb landed, and he said, "Kevin, thank you for teaching us to just move quickly, because we didn't stay at the assembly point long. We left, and then about half an hour later, that bomb arrived. Because from the moment they arrived, the Russians were watching them." Carrying on, Pasha he would periodically send me videos, sometimes of combat. It was very hard trench fighting in a region called Serebryansky Forest. So at that time, he was fighting in the 1st Presidential Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine. And they were positioned alongside, at this time, the Azov Brigade. I think a few of you will know that name. He just kind of gave me his daily updates when he could. And what I saw was a soldier that was not only brave, but also intelligent and an incredible natural leader. So a couple times he sent me videos of him going on little reconnaissance trips forward of his position. And for those who are not military in the room, we try never to go anywhere alone, because if you're alone, no one can support you. Anyhow, he'd be going out and doing that, and every time I said, "Pasha, for God's sake, take somebody with you, don't go alone." He wrote back to me, and he said, "Kevin, you don't understand. When his company went to their new battalion, they got split up." He said, "Half of my guys are brand new. They're scared. They don't think they can survive." He says, "I have to go forward. I have to show them that you can go out there into that gray zone and come back alive." And I'll tell you, I've never respected an officer more than that, because that is truly leading by example. And that's the kind of guy that Pasha is. And we're still in touch with him. And I'm going to go back to that testimonial there. Talking with him, he let me know that of the platoons in his new company, his was the only one that was still more or less intact. And this was about a year later. And the others, the people who didn't train with us, most of those platoons were wounded, transferred out, or killed. But Pasha was able to hold his people together. And I'm not going to take the credit away from him. It's nothing magical that Sabre did. All Sabre did is put tools in Pasha's hands that he could use to keep his men alive and to achieve their objectives. And he's probably going to be one of the first people that I see when I go back. I'm going to pick up a Blue Jays hat for him, because he asked me for a hat as a souvenir from Toronto. But this is, when I'm speaking the rest of the night, I want you to fix Pasha in your minds, because Pasha and the other soldiers like him are the motivation that keeps me fanatically pushing forward with Sabre. It's the only thing I think about. I think about it the first thing when I wake up, and I think about it the last thing when I go to bed, is how I can get more training to these guys, how I can get more of them home alive. Because if Ukraine's going to have any future, it needs Pasha. Pasha has to be there to take his role in society after the war. Okay. This is a little bit of our press coverage. You can just, you Google Sabre and Sabre Training Advisory Group, and this stuff comes up. But it just goes to show you that we've been out there doing the work. In a few cases there, someone asked me if we ever trained in the East. When we started, we were doing a lot of work in the East until it frankly became too dangerous to do that. But that bottom photo was us with, in this case, a CBC journalist out there. Okay, now I promised I would get to the part of what we need. Foremost, okay, like everybody else, I understand, but it is a real need for us, financial support. Okay, right now I run Sabre. We're a team of, it's a small team, we're four inside of Ukraine at the moment. I run it on $6,000 US a month. In order to make things truly sustainable, we need to get to a level of about $30,000 a month. And that's going to let me pay a proper wage to my instructors, some of whom have families, and it's going to let me also sustain myself and take away some of the stress on my wife's shoulders. We also need help engaging with the diaspora. I know a lot of you here from the diaspora today. One of the kind of barriers that we've had is we are a smaller, newer organization. We don't have a lot of on-the-ground representation here in Canada. So for us to engage with the diaspora groups, it's kind of, we're knocking on the door and they're going, well, you could be anybody. And it makes it a little tough. So helping us to build up our standing and make sure that people have heard of Sabre, that's a big deal for us as well. Then of course, does anyone here happen to work for the Prime Minister's office? Pathways for state collaboration. We're climbing the ladder in Ukraine. One of the other first things that I'm doing when I go back. Has anyone here heard of 3rd Army Corps or 3rd Assault Battalion? Okay, excellent. So that's probably the best conventional unit in Ukraine, and we've been invited to join them in a training project for the Corps to start upskilling their subordinate brigades. That's basically going to be our main work going on. So I'm going to go sign that MOU and then bring my guys out to the training site and get them rolling. And then of course is the smaller stuff, materials and equipment. We always need things like, we've got our Starlink, but we need things like EcoFlows, it's a portable battery station, various other things. Channels for communication, okay, reaching into the military. We have in our back-end team some active duty Canadian Armed Forces members, but we're always looking for more connections, because what we are learning now in Ukraine, should this war go wider, and I personally believe that it will, we need to pass these lessons learned back now. We need to start changing training now. I was at my old reserve regiment last night talking to some of the young troops and telling them what I've seen and answering their questions, because I want them, forewarned is forearmed, and I want fewer of them to die in order to get some lessons on the battlefield. It's not necessary. And then finally, it feels self-serving to say it, but recognition, getting the word out there about the work that we're doing so that we have the kind of standing that people, when I contact them, they go, hey, Sabre, I've heard of you, okay? And it's that social proof that they know that we are a legitimate organization. So, the presentation's gone a little bit speedier than I intended, but we're just gonna have more time for Q&A, which is, I think, the main thing. I really want you guys to have all the information you need to have faith in us. If you want, take a photo of our contact there, but you can just go on our website, www.sabretag.org, and that's Sabre spelled the proper way, the British way. But yeah, hop on there, you can reach out to us, and I promise that we'll get in touch with you. So without further ado, let's jump into the Q&A.
Other than financial donations, do you take any material donations?
Right on. So, absolutely. Medical supplies are always needed, and if we can't make use of them, I promise you, one of the partner organizations, we partner with a lot of people that are involved in medical training. We can get it to them, or we can get it to the units that we support. So anything like that, humanitarian stuff, things like socks, things for children, we don't take it, but we can point to, we can point to groups that do. We're not exactly a do everything shop, but we will always do the maximum that we can to facilitate any way that people want to help Ukraine.
would you mind walking us through how your training mission is actually different, or how a Ukrainian soldier goes through a training, official channels and then additional channels?
For sure. First I'm just going to talk about the way that we format work, and I'm going to go back to Pasha, and I'm going to talk about how we did things with his company. So when we are given, there's kind of different ways you can train. You can train brand new recruits, or you can train an existing unit that's going to fight together. In Pasha's case, we were training an existing unit. So the first thing that we did is we took them in, and we had a kind of set of skills that we measured their existing familiarity with. So we just wanted to see if they knew anything about mission planning. We wanted to see how they would approach patrolling through a potentially hostile area. And basically we spent the first week just assessing the level of individual skills in the troops, seeing if they knew things like navigation, what was their weapons handling like. Once we had a rough idea of their existing skill level, then we started to work on the individual skills gaps that we found. In this case, a lot of the soldiers were really unfamiliar with or not confident with map and compass navigation. So we started to hit those individual skills. Once we were happy with the level of individual skills of the troops, then we move on to what's called collective training. And at this point, we are training the soldiers individually, but we're more than that, training the team to work together. So we start at the squad level, that's like 8 to 10 troops. We're teaching them a little bit of mission planning. We're teaching them communication within the squad, how they should move through certain areas, because it's a lot of stuff that people don't think about. When you're moving through a closed space, you want to kind of orient yourselves as a squad differently. Later on, we moved on to platoon collective training. So at this point now, the squads are the little coherent pieces that we're moving around. And this is where we really got into mission planning. It's something that Ukrainians lend themselves to creative thinking. I think everyone here probably knows that. And giving Ukrainians the tools to build a plan, hear the voices of the soldiers in the team so that they feel confident that they've actually helped make the plan, it really works. Ukrainians take to it. We had an easier time teaching mission planning to Ukrainian troops than I've ever had teaching to Canadian troops. Various reasons for that, but at the end, they were operating at the company level. Okay, so the platoons are operating independently. We're basically overseeing the officers making their plans and delivering it to their troops. Then we're watching them execute these training missions that we give them, and we're giving them little challenges. You know, like in Pasha's case, Pasha's platoon sergeant, his second in command, was a guy named Roman, very, very competent, incredible at his job, but Pasha was also a very motivated guy, so Roman would always have to remind him, Pasha, this is my part of the work. Let me do my part. You worry about your high-level stuff. I'll worry about the details. Anyhow, one day, to teach Pasha a bit of a lesson, during the conduct of the training, we said, hey, Pasha, you just got shot by a sniper. You're dead. Roman's taking over. And it's at the end of the training that we do that kind of thing, where we have them operating autonomously. They're doing their own thing, and we just give them little challenges, just to test to make sure that they have those skills that they need. Now, I hope you don't mind, this is a bit of a detailed answer, but it's a big question. So that's how we train a unit that's going to fight together. How we train recruits. We know that they're recruits. We know that they're coming in with, or we assume that they're coming in with basically zero military knowledge, and that makes it a little easier for us because we just dictate the plan now. We don't need to worry about assessments because we're going to give them the knowledge that they need. Again, we start at the individual level. It's little things like just how to take care of your weapon, how to load your weapon, how to fire your weapon. Then later on, we start moving to that kind of like squad level stuff, how to communicate within your squad, how to communicate on a radio, how to navigate. And by the end of a recruit course, they don't need the same level of training. They just need to have all those individual skills that we were covering off in the first week of the unit training, we'll call it. The good news is when you're training recruits, typically, in the best case, you have more time, so you can really soak in those skills and soak in those good practices. Things like not staying at an assembly point, not staying grouped up for too long, making sure that you're moving in cover, because now we have this ubiquitous drone threat. How that differs from the Ukrainian training. Unfortunately, I alluded to it earlier, the Soviet legacy of training is a very, very bad one. A lot of Ukrainian instructors, in fact, this is germane to this, okay? A lot of Ukrainian instructors, and it's not personal faults of these people, it's faults of the system, it's faults of the leftover, I call it Soviet residue. They're often taught to teach the recruits, this is what you need to know, do it this way, but they're not taught the why of it. And so Ukrainians are incredibly inquisitive people, and they always go, well, why do we do this? My instructors, I'll tell you, they always have an answer, and they better always have an answer if they don't want my boot in somewhere they don't want it. But oftentimes, the Ukrainian instructors, they go, it's what they say in the book. And we just do it because it's what's in the book. I don't know. And the issue is, sometimes that book was written in 1965 by Tovarish Koruptovich, and he either didn't really give a shit, or he was drunk all the time, or, you know, I think everyone here knows the problems with the Soviet Union. And so it's not an indictment of these instructors. They're doing their best. Most recently, my team was out somewhere in the east of Ukraine. They were working with border guard instructors. And after the first week, the border guard instructors came over to my guys and they said, hey, we really like how you guys are doing things. Can you also, can we sit in, can we watch, can you give us pointers? So now we're going to go back and we're going to train those instructors. And it's my goal to bring them up to our, it's my goal for them to exceed our standard. And this is the biggest thing that we want to do, is we want to build the capacity for Ukrainians to train themselves. Because it's all good. I can go there and I can churn through. If I got my dream budget, Sabre would train 4,000 troops per year, okay? That's a drop in the bucket of what we need. I would rather train 4,000 instructors per year, junior leaders, junior officers, and NCOs who can go out, take the resources we give them, and become what we call a force multiplier. Spread their knowledge to as many recruits as possible. And then, you know what? At that point, our effect gets magnified, and I'll be satisfied. When our students go on and each of them train, say 10 guys a month, okay, and we've got a 10 times return on the training we've done, I will begin to be satisfied with our work. I hope that answered your question. Yes, in the back, there, middle.
Considering that a lot of their equipment was really Soviet, was there a difficulty in transitioning between Soviet equipment and Western equipment? I think I remember reading that the Soviet compass, at least for artillery, was 6,000 mils.
Yes.
With the Western 6,400.
Yeah, the wonderful larger Soviet mill. Okay, so first question first, second question second. So we do have some good contacts with not with Operation Unifier directly, but with SAG-U, which is the NATO kind of like coordination effort with the NATO training. We are trying to push some lessons learned back to the American civil affairs people that are inside Poland. And here and there, I've had some intermittent contact with other people throughout, oh, sorry, pardon me, I misspoke, not SAG-U, NSAT-U. SAG-U is an American initiative, American-led initiative. Anyhow, it's a little bit difficult, again. The openness of Ukrainian society to non-government organizations helping the military is kind of unprecedented, and it doesn't have an analog in the West. So, as it was put to me by an officer from my old regiment that was out there in Poland working, in Germany working, he said we're not quite sure how to interact with NGOs. So it's a little bit tenuous, because we really want to start generating lessons learned products and firing those into the Western system. We just need to basically find a client for it. And then your second question about the equipment. It's not that big of an adaptation. So yeah, there's things like the Soviet compasses, whatever, toss those in the trash. We now, it's just because it's simpler, like for example, we teach, instead of milliradians, we teach with degrees, and that thankfully never changes. And so there hasn't been a huge problem with things like that. Other stuff, or the larger stuff like armored vehicles, we don't have to deal with very much because the Ukrainians, they've got the Soviet stuff figured out. It's small things like how to, getting our instructors sort of, in the Army we would call it an instructor indoctrination, where they come in and we give them like a base briefing. So typically what we'll do is, one of our instructors is from Georgia, and he'll come in. He's very, very well versed on handling AK pattern weapons, but also the sort of M4 or C7 style weapons. And so he'll do that first little introduction. Here's how you load it. Here's the the fastest way to do all this. It's stuff like that that really is the only thing that we have to adapt to, and that is, I mean, it takes an hour. The other stuff that we're doing, because we're taking the systematic approach to training, because we are trying to bring modern, tested maneuver warfare style tactics to the Ukrainians, that requires no adaptation on our part, thankfully. So it does streamline our work. Yes?
And what were some of the challenges that you encountered with the language difference and the resolutions that you came up with to
overcome them?
achieve success, overcome?
Yeah, so first thing, all of our training, with the exception of one instructor who is a foreigner that's a native Russian speaker, but all of our training is delivered in Ukrainian. We have phenomenal interpreters. Sort of my right-hand man, he started as an interpreter and has become the, I guess, secondary director or the director of the Ukrainian legal entity. His English is phenomenal, his Ukrainian's even better. But we make sure that what we're teaching is completely comprehensible to our students. That does create some friction. That kind of slows things down because, of course, most of our instructors are teaching in English and then it has to be translated. And then questions have to be translated back. But the big thing is that we just make sure that we're providing high-quality interpreters who know the relevant vocabulary and also know the subject matter enough to intelligently answer the nuances of a question that's asked to us. Because at the end of the day, if we view it as a failure if we leave a lesson where any number of those students don't understand what we were trying to teach. And we take great care to make sure that that's never the case. Right. In the red man?
The unifier has trained, I understand, over 30,000 troops. Have they not employed the NATO standards that you employ? And how have they not met what you are doing? And secondarily, have you approached the Canadian government or the Department of Defense to arrange to be able to get support from them abroad? What is the reason that you have gone out on your own?
So that's a bit of a long question, and it's one that I have to be sensitive on because I don't want to, frankly, I don't want to piss anyone off in the government and give them reason to be annoyed at me. So the first part of that is how our training differs from Operation Unifier. So Operation Unifier, they absolutely are employing the same methodologies. The problems that they have is frankly, they lack the cultural understanding that we have. They're going to come in there trying to train the way that you train a Ukrainian soldier, the way that you would train a Canadian soldier. And it just doesn't work because the way we train in Canada is much more leaning on authority. Private, you will do this. Okay, if you take that tone, if you take that angle with a Ukrainian, especially, say he's a 45-year-old father of 3, okay, who was a taxi driver 6 months ago. You take that tone with him, he's going to walk away because there's no respect in the way that you're talking to him. We've also heard, I mean, I can't say who and I can't say where, but there are some extensions of the Western training that are elsewhere, closer. And the issue is that they're just observing Ukrainian instructors, and they're not really contributing. And it's very frustrating for me because we have this higher level we're embedded at a much higher level. The other thing too is that Ukraine is not the kind of society where you fill out your nice little permission slip and show up at the door and say, hello, I'm applying to work with your brigade. It's achieved through personal relationships. We're not working with 3rd Assault Brigade because we, as I said, filled out an application. We're working that way because we built up a reputation and we built up personal connections. And unfortunately, this was a problem with Unifier prior to the full-scale invasion as well, and I know that from both sides. I've heard it from a Ukrainian officer and I've heard it from a Canadian officer. The rotations were simply not long enough for these NATO soldiers to build rapport and build personal relationships with their students. And it's not always that you have to do it with the students, but with the people that you're working alongside, we'll say, so the officers that are facilitating training. And you just don't have those bonds of trust built up, and so you're frankly not going to be allowed to do a lot of the things that you have to as an instructor, because the pressure is on that Ukrainian officer to make sure the training is the best that it can be. And if there's even a shadow of a doubt in their mind that you're going to start teaching them something that's only relevant to Afghanistan, then they're going to say, no, screw this. They're going to put you on rails as an instructor. It's even happened to us. Now, when it comes to approaching the Department of National Defense, yes, we have applied the Directorate of Military Training Cooperation via their Military Training Cooperation Program. We've applied for funding. It's a modest amount. This year we asked for $218,000. I have to have a conversation with the Defense Attaché when we get back, because I need to find out why we're not selected for that. I can't give you an answer on that one. I was in Ottawa yesterday trying my damnedest to get an answer, because from the name of that particular effort, I would think that we fall straight into their bailiwick. I know other organizations that they funded. I don't have an answer, and anything that I give would be conjecture, and moreover, it would be conjecture tinted by my current frustration. So I'm just going to stay away from that. We're not giving up, but as a result of this, our attitude is to put forward our requests of private donors and try and find ourselves the money outside of the Western government system first to make ourselves sustainable. And then later on, when we've got more status, frankly, when I can come to Ottawa more often and start knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, I need your help. Because that's just part of it. Within a democracy, you have to, if you want something done by your representatives, you have to be there with those representatives, constantly, not necessarily needling them, but persuading them, giving them reasons to work with you. Did I answer the question satisfactorily? Good. The gentleman in the black jacket.
Like most people in the room, we have family in Ukraine. Okay? Our family includes a young wife whose husband just got his birthday, which is fine. However, when he went to get his personal combat equipment, some of it is lacking or inadequate. Is that a problem? We try to help him get stuff to save his life, right?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't get a helmet or body armor.
Yes, lacking equipment is lacking, equipment that's lacking, equipment that's low quality. It's something that we hear all the time, and it's one of the things that I'm sure you can tell by the change in my demeanor. It makes me incredibly angry. It makes me furious. Most recently, there was a person arrested in Kyiv after he assaulted a cyclist, and it was found that he was given a 25 million hryvnia contract to supply uniforms. They were later on found to be of inferior quality. This is a story that happens time and again, and it doesn't have to happen because there are Ukrainian companies that produce high-quality uniforms, high-quality armor, and they are there for the purchasing. Now, it's perhaps more expensive than the average mobilized soldier that can afford, but the question is why aren't those companies being leveraged to supply these things? And it is a deep frustration of ours. One of the soldiers that trained with us at the same time we were training Pasha, one of my former instructors, he's a U.S. Marine Corps artillery captain. He sent me $2,000. He said, Kevin, I want you to go to the store and I want you to buy the following things for for this soldier. He had moved on to Azov. I went, I got all that stuff. One of the things that I bought him was it's called a gorget. It's the neck armor. That saved his life. And it was only because our former instructor made it his personal business to get that gear purchased. So that's a huge problem. That's one that, frankly, it's only going to have a civil society and political solution within Ukraine. We can help supply soldiers when we've got the means to do so, but anything that has to do with policy, anything that has to do with, dare I say, corruption inside of Ukraine, that's way outside of our remit. But yeah, it's the fact that it's a problem, as I said, it makes me furious. Next, in the U of T sweater.
Yeah, that's going to be my first question about incorporating technology in your training. So you mentioned mission training and stuff like that. So how much you incorporate like Delta, situation awareness system in the mission training, or maybe wargaming software on the top of that, or maybe any other tech, and how it compares to what CAF is using right now for the mission training. And second question, sorry, pretty much second what Miroslav was asking, do you plan to actually apply for training CAF personnel based on your Ukrainian experience? Because I think now with the drone warfare and with pretty much other technology stuff, it's important to be in both directions. So you training Ukrainian soldiers and potentially training Canadian personnel on the experiences that you got in Ukraine. Thank you.
Okay, these are very good questions. Thank you. They're also going to be pretty long ones. So the first one, when it comes to new technologies involved in mission planning, so you mentioned the Delta Combat Awareness System. For people that don't know, it's kind of like a force tracker. You can have a GPS map. It shows location of friendly forces. You can make plans on it, and it's generally very, very helpful. You can also share imagery, live imagery through it. It's a very, very incredible piece of software. So first of all, it's way ahead of what the CAF uses right now. The ability for Ukraine to rapidly develop and iterate technology is completely untouched. The only people who even come close are regrettably, certain parts of the Russian military industry. So yeah, one of our big things, I have a proposal in with the National Guard of Ukraine. I want to do basically an empirical study of how we integrate these technologies into the mission planning process. How do we, for other things as well, how do we implement drones in a strike capacity, but in such a way that they can be ordered by troops on the ground with a very short time between order and strike. And then as well, how do we integrate things like ISR, so intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drones, into the down to like the lowest level at the squad level, and how do we do this? We want to develop this empirically. We want to develop tactics, techniques, and procedures out of that, TTPs, and then we want to start being able to kind of publish those as documents that we can hand out to our various partners in the country and disperse that training. But again, stuff that's developed in a systematic way. As for training the CAF, I will train Ukrainians for free forever. The CAF, if they want to benefit from our knowledge, they're going to have to pay us. We really definitely want to do that, though. As I said before, it's a bit of a grim thing to talk about, but I do expect this war to go wider. I don't think it's impossible that Canadian troops become involved in some theater of combat. And I want to make sure that fewer of those young men and women that were like me down on the enlisted level, I want to make sure fewer of them die, because there is always a certain price to lessons, and to be very blunt, if we can learn the lessons that have already been paid for, then it will save Canadian lives down the line. And yeah, so I'd love to train with the CAF, but again, it's kind of uncharted territory, so we're going to have to figure out exactly what that looks like and if it's even legal in certain cases. Next question.
Like, how did you get them? Are you working with the Ukrainian army in some way, some liaison? Like, is it one person, or how do you do it?
So it's a delightful mishmash. I had someone ask me once who our contact was in the Ministry of Defense, and I just kind of laughed. It's tough to get those kind of high-level connections, but fortunately we don't need them. So when we started working, it was with a unit of guys. They had started as partisans who fought west of Kyiv and were disrupting and in fact helped prevent the encirclement of Kyiv. We just met them in the street. This is back in the winter of 2022. And it sort of took off from there. We work with interpersonal connections. We work with someone, we build a good reputation with them, and then they say, hey, you should talk to my friend Taras. And then we go talk to Taras, and we do some work with him. Funny enough, Pasha's company, we met the commander of their sister company while working with that first unit on the same it was a piece of abandoned land we were using, and he walked over asked who we were. When we told him, he said, hey, can I get your contact info? And then that's when we started working with that, or shortly after, we started working with that brigade. And so it's just been this little kind of, almost like climbing a ladder through these personal connections. And it's the same story every time. We make the introduction, we kind of lay out our bona fides. They say, okay, we'll give you guys a shot. Then we prove ourselves with that group. It's a bit of a time-consuming process, but it's gotten to the point now where we're working up at the corps level, and not just with Third Army Corps, but with some others as well. And it's been painstaking, but I personally think it's the best way to do it, because we've got, rather than just kind of like, you know, popping into the president's office and having him sign a piece of paper that has us working up here, we've built this foundation up to this very high level, and I'm really, really proud of that. I can't take credit for it. It's just been the really good work of the team that I've had with me. So, next question.
Do any of your units, or is there any, what kind of level of interaction is there with groups like Rickshaws for ZSU or other type organizations? It's tough. So we have some levels of interaction. I haven't heard of that organization, but you know, I met at the Come Back Alive offices, and we talked with them. The thing is a lot of organizations are very siloed. They're very focused on working what they're working on, and there is a constant problem of, even in the NGO world, corrupt people that will embezzle donations or sell equipment that's donated to them. And so unfortunately what it leads to is a lot of, well, not a lot, but a little bit of mistrust. And so it's tough to build those connections. Now we are, and we do, but the thing with us is that I think it's probably going to become more relevant in the next year, but we haven't had that much need for equipment. We've been primarily working with the National Guard of Ukraine for the past few years, and I have to say, compared to the Army, they are generally better organized. It's less likely that you're going to see soldiers without certain kinds of equipment. But it's out there, it's possible. We have a handful of liaisons that we can kind of leverage to address those things. And I mean, in the training world, I'll put it this way, our connections are much stronger in the training world. So earlier on I was talking that we work with organizations that specialize in medical training. That's probably the best sort of connections that we have, because when our students or their leaders ask for more complex medical training, we've got people that we can call who specialize in that. They come in, they augment our instructors on the ground, and it kind of is like a joint project. That's the biggest sort of partnership for us, is in the training sphere. When it comes to things like equipment, we're a little bit less involved, and it's just, personally for me, it's just a handling thing. Like the less that we have to move stuff physically, the better, because it lets us focus on our main task. All right. Yes, sir.
Do you know if there are many other organizations such as yourself doing the same or similar work, and where do they come from?
So there have been a handful. There was one that came up at the beginning called the Mozart Group. Unfortunately, they had a pretty fiery meltdown due to internal conflict. There have been a few others. Now, at the risk of sounding arrogant, there is nobody doing what we do at our level. Our back-end team it consists of training development officers whose whole career is to basically do what we are doing, adapt NATO-style lessons to foreign audiences. I am aware, I'll modify my statement, there is one other group that acts at a similar level, but we kind of confine our training to the company level and below, so basically to like captains and majors and down. And they primarily, not exclusively, but primarily they focus on majors and above. And that would be this group called Boriviter. They're very good. They've had a head start, not to make excuses for myself, but they've had a head start on us. They've got much better engagement with NSATU and the other higher level organizations, primarily in Germany. But so I'll amend that. There is another group out there doing it. But one of the problems is there's a lot of fly-by-night instructors. I think some people will have heard the SBU arrested a British citizen coming back into Ukraine who had been working for the FSB. And he had taken $6,000 off of them, he'd provide information, and he had agreed to conduct a terrorist bombing on their behalf. So there's a lot of, you have to be careful when it comes to training. When we invite somebody to come onto a base, it's only after our partners on the Ukrainian side have put them through an SBU security screening. And it's a serious one. They called Misha, our Ukrainian director, the other day, and they listed off a bunch of stuff that they knew about him that they had, frankly, no reason to know. They'd done their research. So yeah, we've got to be really careful, and that's why I'm always I take it very slow when we work with other organizations, because what I'm not willing to do is put a bad or incompetent instructor in front of students. I won't do it. So I hope that answered your question fully. Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions. So, anyone else? Yes, young man.
What kind of Russian infantry tactics have you seen commonly used in the field, and how do you teach Ukrainian soldiers to counter them?
Okay, so thank you for that. That's a good question. So, everyone here has heard about the human wave attacks, right? Okay, well, those have evolved. It's not 1,000 screaming North Korean soldiers running at you, and in fact, the North Koreans never fought that way. The North Koreans are incredibly dangerous combatants. But how it looks now. The Russians basically, you can think of the Russians as having 2 tiers of troops. Cannon fodder garbage that they'll throw into anything and abuse to any degree, and relatively well-trained troops. So the big tactic that they like to do now is they will take groups of 3 or 4 of these cannon fodder guys. They'll give them 1 or 2 magazines and a rifle and a radio, and they'll say, you are to walk on this precise route. Do not deviate. So those soldiers go, they walk on that precise route. If they get melted by a Ukrainian machine gun or a drone, then some Russian officer back, he goes, okay, not that route. If they get to a predetermined point, he goes, yes, that's our en route. And then he starts to push competent soldiers through that because he knows that's a vulnerability in the Ukrainian defenses. So how we teach to address that is we want our Ukrainian soldiers, we want them to be using things like wire. So when I say wire, you guys have all seen those spools of concertina wire. It snags on your clothes. It might cut you if you push hard enough on it. This is the kind of thing that you can use to shape enemy movement. We would call it canalization in the Canadian Army. You want to close off routes to them so that they can only use the ones that you've planned. And the ones that you've planned, you've got a machine gun on it, you've got a drone waiting to land on it, and so it's just like, yes, please come into, we would call this a kill zone. Come into my kill zone. There's wire, there's mines. These are the things that we teach for that. It's kind of, think of it as like shaping the battle space so that they can make the enemy's movements that little bit more predictable, make their limited numbers go further and help them, because right now there's such a shortage of infantry that there's a lot of porosity in the battle, in the front line. And so we have to teach alternate ways to address that, and part of that is just putting up these barriers, which is, it sounds very simple, and it is a relatively simple concept. It's not always simple to implement. Good answer? Yes, sir.
Earlier this year, we saw the introduction of special contracts for the soldiers aged 18 to 24, and it seemed that there was an initial uptick with recruitment. Have you seen that play out? Have you seen a surge of young recruits being trained and entering the military? And if not, do you see the Ukrainian government eventually being forced to lower their age restriction?
That's a good question. So yeah, we personally haven't seen the uptick because the Ukrainian military was very careful and tight about who they allow to train the 18 to 24s. I don't know if they've brought in outsiders for that or if they've been just keeping it into kind of like an in-house program. But I can say personally, I have seen many more younger men in uniform and young men and women around Kyiv and elsewhere. But I personally don't think that we are going to see a drop of the conscription age, and I'll tell you why. It's a good and a bad thing. It's because there's a 60% AWOL rate for conscripted soldiers, so absent without leave. What we need to do is improve the quality of training so that 60% of conscripted Ukrainian soldiers don't feel the need to leave their units because they don't have faith in the training or the commanders or whatever reason they give. There are some other things. It's less pleasant to talk about. But I mean, I spend most of my time in Kyiv now, just because that's where I take my meetings and that's where my life is. My team is a little more elastic. But anyway, I walk around and I see plenty of fighting-age males. And maybe they're doing something to contribute to the war effort. Maybe they're not. But there is definitely a lot of kind of like what you would think of as like disability fraud in order to avoid conscription. But I'm not putting blame on the people that do that, because they do it for usually pretty sensible reasons, because they think, hey, I have no guarantee I'm going to be assigned to a good unit. I might be, Comrade Koruptovich, regrettably, is still somehow, many of them are still eking out a career in the Ukrainian military, and some of them are working on their, I mean, it's unpleasant to talk about, but some of these officers are working on the 6th iteration of their unit because they've got their guys wiped out that many times. And frankly, until they're removed, it's just going to be too much of a risk for some people. They're saying, look, unless I'm going to get into a good unit. Now, hey, the solution, volunteer with Azov, volunteer with 3rd Assault, volunteer with Khartia. There are good units out there that ensure that you get good training. But I'm not around to tell each and every draft dodger that. But no, so to summarize, yes, I'm seeing more young soldiers. And no, I don't think we're going to have to lower the conscription age. I think we have other solutions to that. I think, one more.
What is the average length of training that conscripted soldiers would expect to now, this 2025?
On paper, it's 57 days. If they get those full 57 days is kind of anybody's guess. It depends on the honesty and motivation of the instructors. And if those 57 days are employed well is another open question. It depends on the quality of the instructors. With us, right now the program that we're working on is kind of like an upskilling training. And so we have, there'll be soldiers that are already trained, and we're just trying to bring them up to the standard of the host unit. And so that's on a shorter cycle. That's usually like 2-week cycles. So you can expect anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months of training cycles. For recruits, by law, it is supposed to be 2 months, and usually it is. It's just how well is the time used.
I would like to thank Kevin on behalf of Ucrainica and on behalf of all of you for such a great and engaging conversation and a lovely presentation. We thank you for your dedication to the training mission and the soldiers in Ukraine. So,
І вам дякую. And слава Україні!